are you?
I'm going to be better this week than I was last week, so I'm doing okay.
Wait a minute.
You didn't have the triangle figured out, I take it.
I got beaten like a rented red-headed step mule.
So did I. I took your advice a few weeks ago on that game that you got me involved in at NASCAR.com. I go and look at qualifying and try and pick guys that are going to be at the starting differential and all this stuff, and I'm just getting killed. So I'm gonna quit.
I was caught speeding on pit road, blew an engine, and wrecked. Everything that could go wrong last week did.
You did it all on the same lap, right?
Pretty much.
Well, it happens. But Michigan should be easier, right?
Pretty much the way my season goes. I'll have all my guys running around in the top 10, minding their own business, looking good. One of them will screw up, and the other 3 or 4 of them will get beaten, get killed on the restart.
Yeah.
So I hate restarts. If I could go out there and pick up debris myself, I'd be dodging groundhogs to do it.
Hey, Dan, I guess the question needs to be asked then. Have you been kind of on Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s bandwagon? He seems to be the guy who's one of the big teasers out there all year. He does. He runs up top, and he runs really well, and he looks like this is going to be the week to break the streak, and then all of a sudden something happens that he just disappoints.
I wish I was on Dale Earnhardt's bandwagon. At least you're getting top 10s.
Right.
And, that's where the fantasy game goes. Top 10s, top 5s are just as valuable as wins. So you don't always have to get the winner. And Junior, he's been doing great from a fantasy standpoint. It's got to be a little frustrating that he's not visiting victory lane for him, too. And I think he's mentioned that a time or two. But if you keep running in the top 5, the top 10, you're going to be in a position to improve those last couple of positions at the end of the race. And he's going to win unless he starts to get into his own head. And he's got a tendency of doing that, but I would have thought it would have happened before now. So I think he's a great fantasy pick.
Well, before we get into the specifics of the Michigan race, and we're talking to Dan Beaver, who's a NASCAR fantasy racing expert for NASCAR.com and YahooSports.com, and you can follow him on Twitter at Fantasy Race. Dan, how much I tend to, and I think probably most people tend to make their fantasy picks based on who they think might win. How much should you look at just looking for a guy who's a top 10 or a top 5er? I mean, that would change the way you pick a lot of times.
That is pretty much what I look for. Finding that winner a lot of times is circumstance. You get a driver who makes the right pit call at the end of the race. You get a driver who has the right tire strategy, whatever that is. Winning is much more circumstance than it is raw speed on any given week. Logano last week, he wasn't on a lot of people's radar screens. Denny Hamlin was. He at least finished in the top 5. So I think that's the bigger key, is looking for those drivers who are going to give you consistently strong top 5s, top 10s.
Who is there that you're liking this week as we go to Michigan again? Another repave. As we said, at the beginning of the segment, this could well be the fastest racetrack that they go to. That is obviously is going to be unrestricted. Does it change the way you look at the fantasy world this week, going to a racetrack that again is somewhat unproven?
A little bit, but there's not. You can't just guess. You still have to look at a driver's record. And I think that Michigan is going to be mostly just faster. They're hitting 215 in the corners or at the end of the straight. I think they're going through the corners at about 180. There's definitely going to be a track record this week. But all of that, the same guys are going to be going faster. You're going to see some new faces at the front, and this is a great dark horse race for a couple of reasons. But the drivers that are favored to win, I think you got to go you got to look at the record and at least consider it, and then decide which drivers are going to have that little extra something because they can dig a little deeper, they're a little braver, whatever it is, and then you use that as your tiebreaker.
This has been a race that's been really a fuel mileage race over the last few years. And again, you would have to think it would be a similar deal because it's going to even be more of a fuel mileage race if it's not a wreck fest because guys are going to be using more fuel going faster.
True. And the reason it's a fuel mileage race you just hit on is because there aren't a whole lot of cautions.
Right.
There are 2 to 3 grooves, or actually there are at least 2 grooves, 3, sometimes 4 grooves. And I think we're going to lose some of that with the repave. If it was 4 grooves, there may only be 3 grooves because it will take a little bit longer to wear the track in so that drivers can't just stick in 1 or 2 of their preferred grooves. Still, I think we're going to see some side-by-side racing. I think we're still going to see some long green flags. So you're going to, I think, fuel mileage is coming back into play. And it looks like the Fords have done pretty good on fuel mileage, and the Fords traditionally have done pretty good at Michigan anyway with the Roush-Kateers. Toyota's been up there too, though, in the last couple of years on Michigan. So I think that's where the battle's going to come between a Toyota driver and a Ford driver at the end.
Well, looking specifically at who your recommendations will be on Tuesday, the week before Michigan, Dan, who you like for your Yahoo team?
I think I'll probably go with Kyle Busch to win in Group A. It took him; he's struggled there a bit over his career, but last year he found the handle, and I think that the repave isn't going to change things enough that he'll lose it. With the third and the first last year, I think he's going to be that guy that is most likely to win. It's going to come down to him and Kenseth, and that's probably who will make my my Group A list this week. I missed the boat on him last week, so I think Logano, I'm going to jump on the bandwagon, stick him on my Group B, partly because Hamlin and Busch have been so strong at Michigan, and he's got momentum on his side now. He's going to be one of those guys that I'm looking for. Brian Newman is going to be one of my other top picks there. With a 6th and a 5th last week, he has back-to-back victories back in 2003, 2004. Nothing since then until last year. But on the 2-mile tracks combined of Michigan and Auto Club, I think he's got a 5-race top 10 streak or a 5-race top 7 streak running. So I think, and he likes speed. If there's a driver that's got that little bit of extra guts to drive a little bit deeper in the corner, Newman's that guy. In Group C, you got a great chance to do to stretch your allocations on the marquee drivers because Trevor Bayne is back. He finished great here last year. He had a 16th and a 24th. He had a top 10 at Las Vegas as recently as this year. And I think he's got to be on your roster along with Austin Dillon. The number 33 is not going to be the Joe Falk car. The number 33 is going to be a Richard Childress car this week. So Pop-Up is going to give Austin a good motor. He's going to give him a good crew. And in his one start last year at Kansas, he finished somewhere in the mid-20s. So that's going to be my Group C pool this week.
That's a great, that Austin Dillon call is a great call this week. Okay, if we're going to put you on the spot, you're going to pick one guy to win at Michigan. Who's your pick, Dan?
Kyle Busch.
All right, Kyle Busch. Dan, he's Dan Beaver. Dan, thanks again for your time this week. You can follow Dan on Twitter at Fantasy Race. Read all of his fantasy racing previews at NASCAR.com and YahooSports.com. And if you're a subscriber to the On Pit Row newsletter, we'll put links in there to Dan's articles and a highlight of this interview. Dan, thanks again. We'll talk to you in a couple weeks.
I'll be here.
Thank you. Man. Thank you.
All
man.
right, thanks a lot.
All right.